A PLC is a professional learning community. In principle, it is quite simple. A group of teachers get together to identify issues and find solutions to improve student learning. Let's look in on 4 English teachers as they take up Dufour's first PLC question, what do we want our students to know?
Okay, since this is our first meeting of the year, let's review our ground rules, or norms. Everyone comes prepared, we all listen actively, and everyone has a chance to speak their mind.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sure.
I'm on board.
The first item on today's agenda is last year's SAGE test scores, and it looks like you all brought them with you. What are we seeing in these scores? Do you see any problems?
My lowest scores are for writing valid arguments and supporting claims with evidence.
Yeah, mine struggled with it too. But if we're going to have good expository writing, our students will have to learn this.
Okay, let's start with the course standard. Marie, why don't you read that for us?
Yeah. Write arguments to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics or texts using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence.
Obviously, that's more than we can accomplish in one lesson. So here's what I need you to do for next time. Review Writing Standard 1, write 1 learning target for each indicator, and we'll compare and finalize our learning targets when we meet.
Sure.
That sounds good.
All right.
You bet.
Let's fast forward to the next meeting where teachers focus in even more on what students should know.
Okay, we were supposed to write learning targets for Writing Standard 1. How did it go?
Honestly, I wasn't that excited about writing Standard 1 until I tried writing a learning target. But here's what I came up with. I can identify valid and invalid reasoning and evidence provided by an author to support a claim. This is important because I need to recognize valid evidence as I write my own arguments to support my claims. I will show I understand this by analyzing a sample argument to find the valid and invalid reasoning.
That's good. The target I wrote seems to pick up where yours left off. It may be the next step. I can write arguments to support claims when I analyze a topic using valid reasoning to show the strength of the arguments. This is important because I must be able to recognize and use claims and counterclaims that are supported with evidence as I develop my own well-supported arguments. I will show I can do this by analyzing a sample argument and explaining the strength of the claims and counterclaims and the adequacy of the supporting evidence.
Yeah, there's a nice progression towards mastery with these learning targets. I think we've done a pretty good job of deconstructing Writing Standard 1.
Okay, nice work. We've done the learning targets, and we need to write learning tasks that we can use to measure mastery. So to prepare for the next meeting, let's review the 2 learning targets and then come up with a task that we'll use to assess the student's mastery.
In this meeting, our teachers are discussing how to assess the learning targets to answer Dufour's second question. How will we know they learned it?
Okay, what learning task did you come up with for these learning targets?
One thing we can do is have students read about a controversial plan and write an opinion paper on it.
We can also have them read an opposing viewpoint. Then, what do you think? We could ask them to find and write 3 arguments for each viewpoint?
Well, we could also ask them to decide which evidence was most valid and why.
Okay, let's formalize the language of these tasks. We are studying the validity of arguments to support claims. Your task is to identify 3 arguments that support the article's claim. Find and write 3 arguments that support the plan. Find and write 3 arguments that support claims opposing the plan. Decide which arguments seem to you to be supported by the most valid evidence and explain why.
Yeah, this is really strong. So what do we need to do to prepare for our next PLC?
Why don't we bring samples of our students' work on this task?
Let's also bring a summary of our students' conclusions about the paper so we can see how close we're coming to the learning target.
This is going to take some compiling, but I think it'll be worth it.
Our brief demonstration wraps up as we see how this PLC uses evidence to determine the effectiveness of their instruction and to answer Dufour's last question, what will we do if they haven't learned it?
Okay, you've spent some time compiling your data. Who's willing to share the results of your assessment?
I can. My students did pretty well. They found the arguments easily, but 3 or 4 had a harder time judging the validity.
Yeah, mine were about the same. I mean, not everyone struggled, but a few had a hard time. They seem to think if it's in print, it must be true.
Let's chart the results. Each of you write the names and specific learning needs of your students who need more help. So these data show that we still need some work to help students evaluate arguments.
I'd be willing to take a small group and review these concepts in 15-minute sessions over the next 3 days.
This intervention should be really helpful. If you have students who are going to be a part of it, why don't you stay a few minutes and work out the time and place? So what do we need to do for our next meeting?
So you see, a PLC, or professional learning community, is a group of teachers working together to find ways to help students learn. They use data from student performance to guide their decisions. The teachers continue to use DeFore's guiding questions throughout the year and from year to year to improve teaching and learning. Now it's your turn to experience how a PLC works. Study Module 1 on PLCs to prepare for your first PLC meeting.